So it's now time for the strategic movement phase. The Union goes first so that the South has the benefit of knowing the disposition of those forces whenever it assigns its own. And the Union gets to move by rail, by river, by ocean, by road, and then they get to move naval units as well. By rail, they can move 12 SPs in unlimited distance, as long as there's a rail connection, as long as it's unbroken, and the South doesn't hold some town or some railhead or some hex on the way from, the origin to the destination. And it's not 12 per theater, but 12 over the entire map. So where would the Union like to move around some troops? You can see that McClellan's Army of the Potomac has 12 SPs. He really doesn't need 12 SPs. Meanwhile, Patterson is still sort of undergunned here with only 2 SPs. So I think I'm going to take 4 SPs from the Army of the Potomac and give them to Patterson to bring his total up to 6. So he's got significantly more firepower right now than Johnston. So now 8 more by rail. I think we'll take these 3 out of Cairo and move them over to the Army of the Tennessee. That's going to bump Halleck up from 5 SPs to 8 SPs. So he's got the makings of a pretty large force there. So I don't think the Union is going to make any more rail movements. Ordinarily, you want to take full advantage of this strategic movement phase, but it's early in the game, and the Union doesn't really have all that many troops yet. They're not very spread out, so there's not necessarily a need to. I am going to move by river, however, and I want to point out that I didn't move those troops in St. Louis away from St. Louis, because with the South's completion of a river-going ironclad in Memphis, and their addition of a river flotilla in Memphis, it's very likely that they're going to challenge our flotilla in the Mississippi between southeast Missouri, Kentucky, and Tennessee. If they destroy that SP, it's very likely that they'll want to invade somewhere up the Mississippi River. They may do so in Cairo, Illinois. They may do so in Hannibal, Missouri, Quincy, Illinois. The most likely place, I think, though, is St. Louis. And the reason for that is because if the South controls St. Louis at the end of the next turn, during the reinforcement phase, all reinforcements that would be delivered to St. Louis will be forfeited. And because in 1862, turn 4, you're going to get a significant amount of river-going strength points that are eligible for St. Louis, plus the 2 more land-based strength points. Those would be a significant forfeit for that theater. So I want to safeguard those and play it a little easy. But we also want to cover Cairo, Illinois. We could do that with using strategic rail movement, but I'm going to go ahead and use strategic river movement. I don't see any other reason for it, and it just seems like a more fun way to get around. So even though I put all of these 2, 2, 2 up to 3, 3, 3 during the strategic reinforcement phase, I'm going to drop them all back down to 2. Trust that I'll do that off camera. And that's going to give me a total of 3, and I'm going to pop 3 SPs up in Cairo to help protect it from any possible southern invasion. All right, so Evansville, New Albany, and Cincinnati, all 2 2-2s. So now road movement. Even though with road movement you're only limited to a single strength point per theater, it's the most useful strategic movement that there is, because any SP can move an unlimited distance within a single theater, right? So again, the Army of the Potomac is really sort of overmanned. We're going to drop him by 1, so he's down to a total of 7, and we're going to be able to squirrel that 1 all the way around over here to Burnside and McDowell stack. I'll have to get a 5 SP chit there. Okay, so that's 5 SPs for Burnside and McDowell. No reason to do any road movement in the west, and in the Trans-Mississippi, again, the only thing we would really be moving are those 2 SPs in St. Louis. We don't want to move them. Fremont sitting on a single SP. Might be nice to get that over to Curtis, but Fremont would have to move 2, and during the strategic movement phase, you can only move SPs, and you can't leave a general without SPs on purpose. All right, now ocean-going strategic redeployment. Remember that we're normally the Union would get 3 ocean-going strategic SP redeployments, from any port to any port. But because we're playing with the House rule that limits initial Union naval capacity, he's only going to get 2 here at the beginning of turn 3. So we're going to move this 1 SP from the Hatteras Inlet up here to Roanoke Island, with the idea of maybe landing some troops either in Elizabeth City or Plymouth, and then trying to open up a front there south of Richmond in the Carolinas. Now, because Elizabeth City and Plymouth both have these circular anchor markers, that indicates that they're river ports, and they are not ocean ports. So ocean-going NSPs couldn't be used to land troops there for an invasion. Also, that dashed connection between Roanoke Island and Elizabeth City and Plymouth indicates that no ocean-going NSPs are allowed to transverse that area. So instead, the Union is going to have to use 0 SP gunboats, which don't exist as a chit on the map. It's simply a claim that they make that these troops are being carried by these 0 SP naval units. The South can also make the same claim for quote-unquote cottonclads in the special naval rules. Now for strategic redeployment of naval units, the North will take this river flotilla, put it up in Cairo. Doesn't really give it much cover, but nevertheless. And this one naval SP in Hatteras Inlet will go to the Chesapeake Bay box. That gives us 3 up there. Now the southern player doesn't have quite the mobility of the federal player. He gets 7 rail movements, only a single river movement, and also a single road movement per theater. So in the Trans-Mississippi, that road movement is kind of a no-brainer. This 1 SP in Fayetteville, Arkansas is going to come up to reinforce Price in Springfield here, bringing his stack up to 3. As another road movement, I'm actually going to take a single SP out of Mobile. And we're going to move that single SP up here to join Johnston's stack in northwest Tennessee. And we're actually just going to call Johnston the Army of the Tennessee, because we're going to be shipping him quite a lot of SPs, and it's going to get very unwieldy otherwise. So now rail movement, we're going to take these 2 from Corinth and move them right up to sitting next to the Army of the Tennessee. Also these 2 from Memphis. So that's 4 SPs by rail so far for the South. They get 3 more. We're going to take that 1 in Decatur, move it up also, so now we've got 2 more. So for our 2 more rail movements, the most displaced SPs, the furthest away from the action, are these 2 in Columbia, South Carolina. You know, it's tempting to use it to put these 2 SPs next to J. Johnston's stack in his stack, but on his activation phase, he'll be able to grab those relatively easily. They're not so far away, and this unlimited movement would kind of be wasted on them. These 2 in Weldon, North Carolina might be well placed due to possible Union invasion of the Carolina coast. They might need to respond to that. So I think we'll take these 2 in Columbia and move them up to the fight. But the question is, where do we put them? Should we bring them all the way up to Beauregard or Johnston? Should we reinforce Longstreet? Should we reinforce the SPs in Weldon, Virginia, anticipating a Union invasion of the coast? I think that we're going to play a little more proactively, actually, and we're going to move these 2 all the way up here to Christiansburg, with the obvious intent of trying to sneak across into West Virginia, or they might sneak up here and take out federal control of Covington, which would have the effect of putting Burnside and McDowell out of supply. So we're going to try to make the Union worry about the possibility of getting outflanked in the Allegheny Mountains. So we still get to move 1 SP by road in the Eastern Theater, and I think we'll take this 1 SP from Strasburg and put it right into Johnston's stack of 2, make it. Now, strategic river movement, there aren't a whole lot of eligible units. One of those is this guy sitting here in Osceola. We're going to move him right up and join the stack in the Army of the Tennessee. Now for the leader management phase, and again the Union goes first. The sort of no-brainer movement here is that Foote, the only place for him to go, the only stack of naval units, is this single river flotilla here in Cairo. So that's where he'll go. Now Buell, who's a very capable commander who must go to the Western Theater, it would be nice to stick him with the Army of the Tennessee, but that's currently in the Trans-Mississippi. So I think the most logical place to put him is here in Cairo, and I have the intention of eventually moving him over to the Army of the Tennessee to take control. He has exactly the same stats as Halleck has, with the difference of not being a cautious general, so being much more easy to activate and move and attack, especially on turns with low activation points. Pope also needs to be assigned to the west. Why don't we put him up here in Evansville, where we anticipate in a few turns he's going to be having to lead a charge into Kentucky. So with Stoneman, we'd like to put him on a stack that's going to be relatively active, so they have his bonus from being a cavalry general. We plan on trying to be pretty active with Patterson, so let's put Stoneman with Patterson. Now during this phase, each player also has the opportunity to transfer any 2 1- or 2-star generals for free. And the North would like to take advantage of this. First of all, we would like Patterson's stack to be a little more powerful. So because Pope is over here, he isn't doing anything, and he's eligible to be transferred, I think we'll take Pope away from Evansville, move him all the way up to join Patterson. For the last transfer, the second transfer, I think we're actually going to take Stoneman away from the Eastern Theater altogether and put him over with the Army of the Tennessee to try to make them a little more maneuverable. Okay, now the Southern commanders. Van Dorn has to go to the Trans-Mississippi. He could go to Springfield with Price, but he's not particularly defensively minded. He's a more mobile general. So I think it makes more sense to put him with this 1 SP stack here on the border. Morgan has to go to the west, and because the Union just added some cavalry to its Army of the Tennessee, I think it's prudent to add some cavalry to the Southern Army of the Tennessee. So Kirby, Smith, and Bragg both need to go to the west also, but we're sort of running out of stacks of troops. So I think for the time being, we're going to put them both with the Army of the Tennessee. So we really overloaded the Army of the Tennessee with commanders, but I've got a plan here. For our free transfers, first we're going to transfer Bragg out of the Western Theater altogether. We're going to move Bragg to the Eastern Theater and give him command of these 2 SPs in Christiansburg, Virginia. Meanwhile, Polk is also going to come out, and we're going to place him over here in Weldon, Virginia. Sorry, we're going to place him over here in Weldon, South Carolina to take care of any potential Union invasion of the coast. And now it's time for the turn 3 action phases.